All right, so today we're going to dive deep into Islamic eschatology and how the Baha'i faith responds to these ideas.
Yeah.
And you've sent over some really fascinating excerpts,
Yeah.
really thought-provoking, and I'm excited to kind of unpack this with you.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah. It's like where ancient prophecies meet modern interpretations.
It is, and it's a really rich area,
Yeah.
especially if you're interested in like how different faiths deal with these big concepts,
Yeah.
like the end time, judgment, resurrection, all of that.
Right, exactly. So before we get into how the Baha'i faith responds
Yeah.
to Islamic eschatology, let's just touch on
Sure.
briefly the Islamic view of the end times, specifically the idea of Yawm al-Qiyamah,
Okay.
or the Day of Judgment.
Right. So in Islam, it's important to understand Yawm al-Qiyamah is not just an ending.
Okay.
It's also a beginning, a transition to a realm of justice.
Okay.
And this transition is often linked to the appearance of the Mahdi,
Mm-hmm.
a divinely guided figure who will restore justice and righteousness.
Okay. So this Mahdi is central,
Yeah.
but I understand there are some variations within Islam on who this Mahdi is
Yeah.
or what his role is.
Absolutely.
What's the key difference?
Okay. So for Sunni Muslims,
Yeah.
they often anticipate both the Mahdi and the return of Jesus.
Okay.
It's like a powerful duo working to defeat the forces of evil symbolized by the Dajjal or the Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
And that ultimately sets the stage for the Day of Judgment.
Wow. So that's pretty action-packed.
Yeah, it's a big event.
But the Shia Muslims have a slightly different take, right?
Yes. They focus on the return of the 12th Imam,
Okay.
who they believe is currently in occultation,
Mm.
meaning hidden from view.
Okay.
And they believe that he'll reappear as the Mahdi
Yeah.
to establish justice and usher in a new era.
So both branches are looking forward to this figure who will
Okay.
come in and set things right.
Exactly.
And this is where the Baha'i faith enters the picture with
Yeah.
a unique interpretation, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith,
Mm-hmm.
reinterprets these Islamic prophecies
Okay.
and shifts the focus from literal events
Yeah.
to a more spiritual understanding.
Okay.
So for Baha'is, the end times aren't about like a fiery apocalypse.
Right.
It's more about a period of spiritual awakening and transformation.
You know, I always think about whenever anyone says spiritual resurrection, I always
Yeah.
imagine people like levitating or something.
Right.
But the Baha'i faith has a very specific view on this, right?
It does. Baha'u'llah teaches that the day of resurrection isn't a physical event.
Okay.
It's symbolic
Okay.
of the spiritual transformation that happens when a new manifestation of God appears.
Okay.
So those who recognize and accept the new teachings are, in a sense, spiritually resurrected
Mm-hmm.
or reborn, while those who reject the message are spiritually dead, meaning they haven't embraced this new spiritual reality.
And Baha'u'llah claimed to be that new manifestation, right? He
Yeah.
saw himself as fulfilling those prophecies.
Yes, and this is where it gets really interesting. He argued that figures like the Mahdi
Yeah.
and the return of Jesus aren't about literal individuals coming back.
Okay.
It's more symbolic of the qualities and mission of the new manifestation,
Mm-hmm.
which in this case is Baha'u'llah himself.
So it's not about someone like riding in on a white horse.
Right.
It's about recognizing the spiritual transformation that's happening within and around us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for someone steeped in the more traditional interpretations,
Right.
this is a pretty radical shift in perspective.
For sure. And it extends to how Baha'is view Judgment Day as well. doesn't it?
Absolutely. So instead of this day of like fiery reckoning,
Right.
they see it more as a period of spiritual testing.
Okay.
And it's not about God judging individuals and sending them to heaven or hell.
Yeah.
It's about humanity being judged based on their response to the new manifestation.
Okay.
So are they open to this message of unity and love,
Mm-hmm.
or are they clinging to old prejudices and divisions?
It's like that saying, you can lead a horse to water,
Right.
but you can't make it drink. It's about an individual choice to embrace this new spiritual reality.
Precisely. And the consequences aren't about like physical punishment or reward.
Yeah.
It's more about the spiritual state we create for ourselves.
Okay.
So those who align themselves with the new teachings enter a new heaven and new earth,
Mhm.
not literally, but symbolically,
Right.
a state of spiritual unity and harmony.
It's a profound way to reinterpret these ideas,
It is.
focusing on the inner transformation rather than outward events.
All right.
So Baha'u'llah is saying that the time of judgment and transition isn't something in the distant future.
Yeah.
It's happening right now
It is.
in our hearts and minds.
Exactly. And if you think about that, it has really profound implications for how we view our own lives
Absolutely.
and the world around us.
Yeah. So let's dive into some specific examples of how this symbolic interpretation plays out.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the Day of Judgment.
Mm.
What does that look like metaphorically?
Sure.
And how does it apply to our lives today?
Okay.
Let's start there.
Okay. So think of like the traditional image of Judgment Day. Cataclysmic event, fire and brimstone,
Right.
people being judged for their deeds. Now imagine that not as a literal event,
Okay.
but as a metaphor
Okay.
for the inner turmoil
Right.
and upheaval we experience when we're confronted with a new way of seeing the world.
So it's like that moment when your old beliefs,
Right.
your assumptions no longer hold up.
Exactly.
And you're kind of forced to confront this new reality.
Yeah. And that could be pretty unsettling,
For sure.
right? It's a process of letting go of old ways of thinking and embracing these new ideas.
Yeah.
And that can be a really challenging and even painful experience.
Right.
But it's also a process of growth and transformation.
Yeah.
Moving from a limited perspective to a more expansive one.
It reminds me of that quote from Baha'u'llah
Yeah.
in Kitab-i-Iqan,
Okay.
where he's talking about the signs of the new age being present, but not in the way that people expect. It's like the world is changing around us.
Yeah.
But we're so caught up in our old ways of seeing things that we miss the signs.
That's a powerful image.
Yeah.
And it connects to the Baha'i understanding of the Mahdi and the return of Jesus as well.
Right.
Remember, Baha'u'llah saw these figures as symbolic,
Yeah.
not literal.
So instead of waiting for a specific individual
Right.
to appear and solve the world's problems,
Yeah, got
it's
it.
more about recognizing the qualities
Yeah.
associated with these figures: justice, righteousness, spiritual guidance,
Yeah.
and manifesting them in our own lives.
Precisely. It's about embodying those qualities,
Okay.
becoming agents of change in our communities.
Yeah.
It's about actively contributing to this new world order
Mm-hmm.
based on unity and justice.
Which brings us back to that central principle of
Right.
unity. It's
Yeah.
not just a nice idea.
Right.
It's the foundation for creating this new world order.
Yeah.
But how does that translate into like real world action? It can't just be about everyone holding hands and singing Kumbaya.
Right. Of course not.
Right.
The Baha'i faith recognizes the complexities
Yeah.
of building a unified world.
Mm.
It requires us to move beyond just superficial tolerance
No.
and embrace the oneness of humanity at a fundamental level.
Mm-hmm.
It means seeing beyond our differences of race, religion, nationality,
Yeah.
and recognizing our shared identity as human beings.
I'm curious, how does that tie back into this idea
Oh.
of judgment and spiritual transformation?
So for Baha'is, the process of spiritual transformation isn't just about individual growth.
Okay.
It's about our collective evolution
Okay.
towards unity.
Mm-hmm.
Judgment in this context isn't about punishment,
Yeah.
but about recognizing the consequences of our choices both individually and collectively.
Right.
So when we cling to those old prejudices and divisions,
Yeah.
we're perpetuating this cycle of conflict and suffering.
Okay.
But when we choose unity,
Right.
when we actively
Yep.
work to break down those barriers and build bridges,
Mhm.
we contribute to the creation of a more just and peaceful world.
So it's not about passively waiting
Right.
for some divine intervention.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that we have a role
We do.
as co-creators
Yes.
of reality.
Yeah.
We're not just spectators in this whole drama of
Right.
the end times. We are active participants.
We are.
Yeah.
And that's where the Baha'i perspective on Islamic eschatology
Right.
becomes really empowering.
Yeah.
It's a call to action,
Okay.
an invitation to participate in the unfolding of this new spiritual era.
It kind of flips the script on that traditional apocalyptic narrative,
It does.
doesn't it? Instead of fearing the end,
Right.
we're called to embrace the possibility of a new beginning.
Absolutely.
But how does this idea of spiritual transformation actually play out
Mhm.
in like everyday life? What does it look like to actually embody
Okay.
these qualities of the Mahdi
Right.
or the return of Jesus in a practical sense?
Yeah. I think that's where it gets really personal,
Yeah.
and
Right.
really powerful. It's less about like grand gestures and more about those everyday choices we make. Like, how do we respond to conflict?
Right.
Do we like perpetuate that division, or do we seek understanding and reconciliation?
Yeah.
Do we prioritize material wealth over spiritual values?
Yeah.
These are the kinds of questions that, from a Baha'i perspective, become really important in this time of spiritual transition.
So it's about those small acts of kindness, compassion,
Yeah.
and justice that ripple outwards.
Exactly.
Choosing forgiveness over resentment,
Right.
speaking up against injustice,
Yeah.
even when it's uncomfortable.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's about aligning our actions
Yeah.
with those spiritual qualities, embodied by figures like the Mahdi or Jesus.
Right.
It's about striving for unity in our families, our communities, and ultimately the world.
In the tablets of Baha'u'llah,
Okay.
he says, and I'm quoting here, "The time foreordained unto the peoples and kindreds of the earth is now come. The promises of God, as recorded in the Holy Scriptures, have all been fulfilled."
Right.
It's like he's not just reinterpreting prophecy.
Yeah,
He's claiming to fulfill it.
exactly. That's a key point.
Yeah.
And it's a bold claim that for Baha'is signifies the beginning of this new spiritual dispensation.
Okay.
Baha'u'llah saw himself as like the culmination of these prophetic expectations, ushering in a new era where humanity could finally achieve its potential for unity and peace.
And if we take that seriously, it really changes the game, doesn't it?
It does.
It's like those prophecies aren't just stories from the past.
Right.
They're like a call to action
Yes.
for the present.
Absolutely. And it's a call that resonates deeply with a lot of the challenges we face today.
Right.
A world grappling with all this division and conflict, environmental crises. The Baha'i teachings offer this framework for addressing these challenges.
Yeah.
Not through just like political solutions or technological advancement.
But through a fundamental shift in human consciousness.
So for our listener, if we step back
Yeah.
and look at everything that we've explored today, what's like the biggest takeaway?
I think it's this understanding that prophecy can be a really powerful tool for personal and societal transformation,
Okay.
but not in the way that we might traditionally think.
Right.
The Baha'i interpretation of Islamic eschatology invites us to look beyond just the literal,
Yeah.
embrace the symbolic, see those prophecies as metaphors for our own inner journey
Right.
and humanity's collective evolution towards unity.
Okay.
It's a call to action, an invitation to participate in the creation of a world where justice, peace, and love prevail.
That's beautifully put. It's
Yeah.
not about waiting for the world to end.
Yeah.
It's about engaging in that process of creating a new beginning,
Yeah,
both within ourselves and the world around us.
absolutely.
And for those who want to explore this further,
Yeah,
I highly recommend checking out the Kitab-i-Khan
great book.
and the Tablets of Baha'u'llah. They offer so much insight into this really unique and empowering perspective. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.